Here,
It was good. I certainly appreciated it.
all right, go ahead, Paul.
All right, so it's a two-part question. In Numbers, it talks about the cities of refuge for someone who accidentally killed somebody and it wasn't intentional and they just wanted to not get hurt. From the Avenger of Blood. My question first off is who the Avenger of Blood is.
Avenger of Blood was a near relative.
That's what I thought.
He's been redeemed.
Well, the Avenger of Blood was any close relative, could be a cousin, could be a brother, could be an uncle, it could be anyone that sets out to say, hey, you killed my fill in the blank brother, nephew, son, father, and I'm getting even. And you can go after them.
Even if it was an accident, they still go after. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the other part is, it says that the person who accidentally killed them is to go into the city of refuge until the priest dies.
High priest.
The high priest dies. The thing is, the high priest is not necessarily going to be the person that's the avenger of death. So how
Right.
come?
But that's the term at which they can have the right of vengeance. And that right of vengeance has a shelf life. And at that point, the right of vengeance has gone and you can no longer legally kill them.
But if you do.
If you, in other words, if you killed my brother, I can legally kill you and there will be no repercussions from that.
Statute of limitation. Right.
Yeah. But there is a limit to how long you can pursue that.
Okay. Because I was thinking, well, unless the Avenger of Death dies, I would assume then that it's not safe, but that there's a limitation to how long they're allowed to do that.
Right.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean, obviously, people, that's the whole craziness about gun control. Will gun control stop the violence in our society?
No.
Why?
Because criminals don't obey laws.
Because criminals don't obey laws.
Show me a criminal that obeys laws. Then that'll make sense.
Mabel was up there, I think, and maybe Bob. When we wanted to go up there, there was this beautiful dam that was built in Tioga, Pennsylvania, right? It's about 20 miles from my mom's house. And it's got a beautiful site up there. Well, after 9/11, they decided that they were going to block it off so that terrorists couldn't try to blow up the dam and flood the area.
It's,
So there's this road that winds up to the locks of the dam. Okay. And it's this paved road that runs up through there. And on both sides, there's a yard, maybe 100 feet, 200 feet wide on both sides. And as you're driving up through, there were two posts sit there with a chain across it and a thing that says no admittance, Homeland Security, defense of the dam. And I looked at that and I thought, what kind of idiot put this up? You got 100 yards of grass on both sides. Here comes a truckload of jihadists up this road with bombs and automatic rifles, and they come to this chain and they go, foil, turn around and leave rather than just drive around it and go on up to the thing.
it was made.
Or
for
just
honesty.
drive right through the
Or
chain.
drive through the chain. But what good does having a chain when there's nothing on either side of
The
it?
chain, yeah.
Might as well put
There's
a,
nothing else around there, so why would they be coming? Just like where he worked at the Ability Center, they were all scared to death they were going to be attacked, and Bob said something to him about, well, all the places in the country, you really think they're gonna come to this?
Well, that's what I said, because Mom was like, well, we've got to defend ourselves. And I'm going, here's a guy in Afghanistan sitting in a tunnel underground with a globe or a map of the United States, and they're going, where should we strike next?
Roseville.
New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C. No, Tioga County, Pennsylvania.
It might have passed it nonsense.
Yeah.
Blow that little bridge across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were there people that did evil things in the Old Testament times?
Yeah.
Yes. But there's a difference between what people do illegally and what people have a right to do, and that right of vengeance. And why did God give the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth command? Yes, often people go, oh, I'm not for eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Because how do many people interpret that God meant that?
What you did to me, I'm gonna do to you.
That you are supposed to do that. That if somebody hits you and knocks out your tooth, you should hit them and knock out their tooth. Somebody blinds you in one eye, you should blind them in one eye. But that is not the point of that command at all. The point is
That's all you do.
that you can't go beyond that. That if somebody cuts off a finger,
You don't cut the hand.
the most you can do is cut off a finger. You can't cut off the whole hand. Because what is our sinful human heart response to those issues?
Get
To
back
do
at
more, to do worse.
To do worse. And so it's not a you must get even. It is, if you're going to get even, you cannot get ahead. It always has to be proportional to what was done originally. And that's the limit. And so far from being a bloodthirsty thing, it is a non-bloodthirsty thing, because the human propensity is to overdo it.
How come though in, I think it's Leviticus, they're talking about like if your neighbor takes your goat, you're supposed to give like 2 goats or something.
4 goats.
4 goats.
Why is that? Yes, that's the deterrent effect. So how much of a deterrent is if I rob you of $100? I stick you up and I rob you for $100. And maybe they catch me, maybe they don't. But if they catch me, what they're gonna do to me is make me pay you back $100.
Which
Take the
wasn't your
rest.
money in the first.
Which wasn't my money in the first place. I'm just giving you back what I already stole from you.
Right, okay.
Even suffering.
Yeah, what is the deterrent to stop me? Because hey, am I gonna get caught every time that I rob somebody? No, in fact, a bunch of times I probably won't get caught. And if I get caught, all I have to do is give the money back.
No.
What reason is there for me not to try it?
Yeah.
But if I have to give back 4 times, now suddenly there's a penalty there.
Have to rob somebody else.
Then if I rob you, I'm at risk that I'm going to lose a lot more than I gained. Any other questions?
Why did Moses, why did the Lord not allow him to go into the promised land? I was wondering, my personal thing is that he was a defender of the Jewish people, correct? He was the mediator between God and them, and he was always supposed to take care of them and to protect them even from God. That when God would get angry, he would kind of plead their case. But didn't he get angry at them and cursing at them at that time,
But that isn't why God says. Deuteronomy 3:26.
He struck the rock.
Deuteronomy
He said about that
3:26.
rock.
but he also cursed the.
But it was because of striking the rock.
Yeah, he was very
So
clear.
the rock, because he hit the rock.
Yep. And again, why is that so important?
Because the rock represented Christ.
Maybe look at 1 Corinthians 10. Look at 1 Corinthians 10, because this verse is really
Not about the one-time sacrifice.
no. Mm-mm. Mm. Look at 1 Corinthians 10:4. What's 1 Corinthians 10:4?
And accomplished that, and that rock was Christ.
Notice that it wasn't just that there were two random rocks that Moses struck that poured out water. That Paul is saying it was the same rock. That there was more than symbolism here. That rock in somehow embodied Christ.
Now, when it said it followed them, like it was,
Yeah, that's
so like you literally could turn around, you'd see this rock come down the.
I am not going to presume
Okay.
to say how that, but isn't that an interesting verse? So why is it that God hates divorce? That's what God says, right?
Because it mars the picture that he was trying to draw.
Because when you go to Ephesians 5, what does Ephesians 5 tell us about marriage?
It's a picture.
If not, you can't break it.
That the real meaning here is Christ and the church. And to illustrate that truth, God designed the human species to have marriage to be a picture of this relationship between him and his people. And that marriage is supposed to embody that truth in such a fundamental way, because what is almost universal in the human race? It's not universal, but it's almost universal. Most people, what is the percentage of people that marry? Well, it may be smaller now but let's go back throughout all of human history when anyone who was not married that was involved sexually was considered absolutely immoral. When the thought of having a 75% illicit birth rate would have been so unthinkable that no one would have dreamed that it would be possible. What percentage of people in the human race marry?
Most.
Yeah, not just most, but the overwhelming people who did not marry were by far the rarity. And that's why things like in the Catholic Church, that was such a big thing that the priests don't marry, and the celibacy. And how was that seen? That was seen as being this unnatural sacrifice, right? So this universal picture, how many societies in human history have practiced marriage? Every single one of them. So you have this universal picture of God's desire for his relationship. It's something that almost every human being can identify with because almost every human being has participated in it. And he says, okay, here's this picture. Now, why does divorce upset him?
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I've read some verses about this, that God considers if a man divorces his wife, it's like committing violence against
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. So he does that because it mars this perfect picture that he wants to communicate to humanity about how he wants to relate to them. Why is it that God talks about, visiting the sins of the father upon the other? Why does God hate it when the image of fatherhood is demeaned and diminished?
Because he is the father.
Because he's using that picture of fatherhood to communicate his relationship with his people. And if I have a distorted view of my earthly father, if my earthly father was an abuser or was wicked
Or abandoned you.
or abandoned, any of those things, what does that do about my picture of my relationship with God? It distorts it, doesn't it? At a fundamental level. We're not talking about learning a bunch of facts. We're talking about a visceral response.
Actually, always just, I more so relied on God because of having that absence in my life. Like, I could be angry or I could lean on God to be the
Yep.
father since I didn't have my natural one. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
so.
But anyone, and since you bring anyone who doesn't even, and no one does, has the understanding of how that fundamentally harms you. Yeah. So now when we come to this rock, what was the picture that God was trying to paint with this rock?
By Christ.
Rock was Jesus.
It says right there.
Struck the rock.
That he would only be killed once.
Yes, that's the whole point of Hebrews, is that Jesus was to suffer once and for all. So when Moses struck the rock, he was showing the death of Christ, that the only way for God's provision to flow out for us was the price had to be paid. So then the second time, the people start grumbling, and God says to Moses, what? Speak to the rock. Because once Christ has died to provide that provision, what is the means for that provision?
To ask for it.
To ask for it. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Romans 10:13, right? We are to ask for it. The means now is not killing Jesus again. It's not having another sacrifice. It's not doing what the priests did day after day, year after year, sacrificing and sacrificing. It is now we speak to the rock. 1 John 1:9. 1 John 1:9. Oh, come on. 1 John 1:9. Joy, Derek, you guys went to Liberty.
Who says he's not within sin?
No.
Sorry.
At 7.
If we confess with our
I was
sins,
gonna say that.
If we confess our sins,
He's
He is
He
faithful.
is faithful and just to forgive us. So again, what is it? How is it that God's provision comes? Speak to the rock.
So then we have to assume that Moses knew that that's. why he was-
Doesn't matter that Moses knew. Does it? Okay, let me be-
Frustrated as he must have been. Yeah, after 40 years.
does every person who gets married know that that picture that they're doing is a picture of Christ?
No, but at least when you're standing in, if you get married by a preacher, you hear what God has joined together that not man put asunder.
But
So you would.
in every society, people marry in ones that where Christianity has never been proclaimed. But still that picture holds. And so therefore, even though they don't know the reason, did Moses know what God wanted him to do?
Not really.
He knew
Yeah.
what he wanted
Yeah, he
him to
was
do.
told.
He said, speak to the rock. But Moses was
Angry.
angry. And Moses was prideful. What did Moses say when he struck the rock the second time?
Something about me.
Must I give you water again?
Oh, I'm the one
That's
providing
right,
the
yeah.
water.
Now, what is that the essence of?
Pride.
He's the
I
one
am.
doing it, not, yeah.
And God said, you just destroyed this picture that I have spent so much time making.
Now, I think even if he said, here's your water from God, I think God still would have said.
Yeah.
Probably. But it just shows where that came from. And so that brings us to Deuteronomy 3:26, which
He
is,
set up that much time making that perfect picture, and Moses still didn't even realize that's what the picture was.
well, let's go back to 1 Corinthians 10. Verse 6. 1 Corinthians 10:6.
These things occurred as examples
But keep going.
to keep us from setting our hearts on evil.
In other words, why is he saying all that stuff was done?
So that we follow the same thing. Better.
You definitely are seeing an example of what not to do.
That all was done for the future. Look at Matthew 13:17. Matthew 13:17. What's Matthew 13:17 say? And this now you're getting into some really complicated stuff about inspiration. What's that say? Matthew 13:17.
For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it.
In other words, those prophets, they're writing about what's going to happen and what's going on.
They don't understand.
They're going, what is this?
Well, that's the.
What's the meaning of this? So often God did things that the people who were part of it didn't understand. We kind of have this idea that the people in the Bible just knew it all, and they were just going through because they knew what the end was going to be, and they were just marching this predetermined path. No, they were struggling just like we do.
Well, this is,
You gave us Hebrews 4:6 along with the 1 Corinthians before, so is that also? Like
Which is?
the runner thing that it goes along with what?
Go ahead, read it.
As read, it still remains that some will enter that rest, and those who formerly had the gospel preached to them did not go in because of their disobedience, such as
Yeah.
those who didn't go into the promised land.
Yeah. And now Moses obviously isn't the ultimate fulfillment of Hebrews 4:6, because that is talking about the people who utterly rejected the gospel that was preached to them. That would be much more indicative of the Korah, Dathan, and the Byrams. But
Yeah, that's where I am in reading right now, and I was surprised in the chronological Bible that it said, because I really didn't remember that people were, Jewish Christians were thinking about going back to their former Jewish faith and dropping Christ completely.
Way back in.
Well, right, but in the chronological thing, there's a.
Oh, you're in Hebrews, you mean, not back in Exodus.
Yeah, sorry.
The Numbers 16, I mean. Yeah. So even though Moses didn't understand all the implications, do we often understand all the implications of what God commands us to do?
Well, it's like you said, God works at the moment. Like God says, okay, I want you to go here and do this thing, and you were to do that and do that thing. He's not going to take a day from now. I'm going to have you do this. And then after that, this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. It's going to be, you're going to do this thing. And I'm going to tell you after you've done that, what the next step is.
Acts 8. Verse 26.
Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, rise and go toward the south, to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza.
All right, so what's his command?
Go.
Go to the road from Jerusalem to Gaza. Next verse, what happens?
This is a desert place. And he rose and went. And there was an Ethiopian, a eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians.
Or as the NIV says, so he started out, and on his way, he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official. Does he ever get to Gaza? No,
Do we know that he doesn't?
no.
Because he gets picked up and
Yeah.
goes somewhere else.
He jumps.
Okay.
So God told him go down to Gaza, and he never even gets there.
Verse 40.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And as he meets this guy on the way, what's the Lord say to him then? Go up to this man. Now he could have said, "No, you said go to Gaza. I'm going to Gaza." God said, "No, go talk to this guy." And he talks to him, and he talks to him, and then the guy gets baptized, verse 39, and what happens? In 39,
Takes Philip up.
Philip takes.
the Holy Spirit takes him up, teleports him, and he ends up way up in the north,
Never makes it to Gaza.
never makes it to Gaza.
Technically, he said, go south to the road, the desert.
Yeah,
road
he
that
could
goes
go to the
down-
road.
The road that goes down from Jerusalem.
So my point is, a lot of times we get hung up on something that we think God wants us to do, and we bull ahead with it even when God says, no, go off. Because sometimes God tells us to do something and we have no idea why he's telling us to do it. And that's just a first step in our obedience in starting that. God says, okay, enough of that. Let's go over here instead.
Sometimes he has no purpose except to see if you be obedient.
If you'll be obedient. And of course, the greatest example of that is what? Oh, yeah. Did God at any point plan that Abraham was going to kill Isaac?
Did it again.
He
Did
could,
God at any point plan that Abraham was actually going to kill Isaac?
No.
No. But he told him to do it.
Told him step by step.
Yep. And it was only at the last minute. So what was it that God was addressing?
I want to see if Isaac
His-
meant more to him than God.
his
did.
commitment, faith.
His obedience, his faith.
And the principle, because he thought that God was gonna raise him too. He didn't
Yep.
just murder him.
So
Oh, yeah. That's,
God has a whole bunch of different things going on there. But the bottom line is, God didn't mean for him to do what he's telling him to do. He had a plan, but did God tell Abraham, now Abraham, I want you to take your son up there. I'm going to wait right till the last minute and then I'm going to stop you from doing this, but let's just go through. No,
well, yeah, anybody would do it at that point. Oh, okay, you're gonna stop me. No problem. Go do that.
so did Abraham know what God's plan was?
Definitely not.
No. And oftentimes, and that's why faith is about obedience in each step.
So was that the righteousness that was accredited to Abraham?
Oh.
That he took Isaac up there? I always thought it was just that he went when he told him to go.
I think it was all of that.
Well, it's all of it, yeah. But at the end of the day, it was that he valued obedience to God more than the life of his son. Now, let's go back to Moses. What was Moses' failure? He didn't listen to what God said to do and obey it. He got angry. He was frustrated. And he said, I don't have to listen to what God's saying. I'll just do it my way. Now, there's a couple of principles in that. Why was it that God was so harsh with Moses compared to what God was with many people who failed to be obedient?
Well, because
The person that I always compare to Moses, who's another Old Testament character that you compare to Moses?
Elijah.
And he comes out way different than Moses. He's the guy that almost every men's conference, at least 5 of the speakers speak about.
David.
David.
Oh, there.
oh,
Oh, yeah.
Think about all the screw ups that David had. And how often God basically let him get away with it. Compared to Moses, who pretty exemplary, and this one time, and God says, that's it, you're done.
Yeah, but their positions were different. Moses had a position of being a godly leader.
David technically did too, but what's the difference?
Well,
It was obedient.
more of an example. He,
wasn't he
he
laying
knew
down the
God on
law?
the mountaintop.
Yeah. Moses knew God.
The intimacy.
He saw God. And what spiritual principle does that come down to? To whom
Much is given.
much is given,
Which is required.
much will be expected.
The question about Moses.
Sure.
I think he was frustrated because of all the years of dealing with those people.
Of course he was.
He even said it at the end that because of you people, I'm
Yeah.
stuck here.
Doesn't it mean that like, maybe that, I'm not trying to make excuses for Moses, but maybe that's one reason why he did what he did.
It's
It's definitely.
a huge part of why he did it. Probably almost all of the reason he did it. But the bottom line is, he knew God. With the light that he had, he should have been able to do better.
That was my original question, if you remember. I said, did he do that? I knew about the rock. I mean, I've read it
Yeah.
100 times. But I said, did he do that because that he turned on the Jewish people who he was supposed to protect? That,
But it's not, that wasn't, the fact of the protecting the Jewish people, that's a subsidiary. The problem was he didn't obey God.
100%, but I was wondering if that was.
And yeah, he was frustrated with them. Who wouldn't be? My word, when you read the way that they treated Moses, you would just want to shake people. And go, come on.
Yet other times he did protect them when God had had enough of them.
Yeah,
God, you can't do that.
Yep.
Done the whole
but again,
lot.
that just raises the bar even higher. Because that incident comes well before the rock, where he was up on the mountain. And so therefore he knew what he should be doing. He had passed that test before. But now he comes back around to that test again, and this time he's regressed from where he was earlier.
Although, when he was defending them, it was before he actually went down the mountain and saw them. 'Cause he
That's
lost it
true.
When he saw them.
He was not a happy camper, as Mel Brooks points out. He's 15, 10 commandments.
That's the ticket.
You know, it's funny that the Jewish people venerate Moses now. They talk so highly of him, and I'm around them all the time in the synagogue. And I feel like saying, realize, like, all you do is talk bad about God, talk good about Moses. You would have been wanting to crucify Moses, if you were back then. You know what I mean, they don't even see it.
Well, and isn't that exactly what Jesus says? Is you venerate these prophets and you build massive tombs for these prophets and you extol these prophets, but your forefathers were the ones that killed them. Well, if you go to John 8,
So we're not going to Deuteronomy.
verse 33. What's John 8:33?
They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?
Do you understand what a stupid statement that is?
What are they thinking?
Who knows?
Speaking of Egypt, that's for sure.
That's it.
Egypt,
Well,
Captivity or
400 years?
Babylon,
Yeah.
the Philistines before Babylon,
Syrians?
the Assyrians,
There's a whole bunch of them.
the Persians, the Greeks. We've just come through Hanukkah, the
Could be-
Maccabean revolt.
Could they be speaking in the present tense? But they're not slaves. They're
But
just been
they
freed.
say they've never been slaves. So that means
descendants have never.
And never
Been
been
slaves.
slaves, which means
Yeah.
not.
Okay,
The bottom
but they
line
still could
is,
be talking present tense.
perhaps, but right then, right there, what were they?
But they weren't slaves. No more so than the people in the Virgin Islands are slaves of the United States government. Even though we.
Yeah, okay. If a United States soldier in the Virgin Islands is trying to get back to base, can he grab any citizen of the Virgin Islands off the street, grab him by the collar without any repercussions, slam him face down in the road, say, pick up my pack, turn around and walk back carrying my stuff a mile?
Not that I know of.
But every single Roman soldier in Palestine in the days of Jesus could grab any Jewish man, no matter how wealthy, no matter what their station, could grab him by the throat, keep all of the luggage that he's carrying on them, turn them around and say, back to the next mile marker, carry my stuff for me.
Still
And what did Jesus say about that?
Do it 2 miles.
If a man demands that you carry his stuff a mile, carry it.
Okay.
They ask for your cloak or your coat, give them.
So that was a much different thing than saying the American Virgin Islands or the Philippines in 1938. They were slaves of Rome. They were a subjugated people. And how do we know that?
Subjugated, but not.
Yes, because how do we know that? And it's endemic to the Christian gospel. It is the fundamental core of the Christian gospel.
Jews.
Jesus was crucified, dead, and buried, and rose again. What does that tell us about the status of the Jewish people?
Lost.
They were not free people. They were slaves of Rome. Because how could Jesus be killed?
The priest couldn't do it.
By
Romans could.
crucifixion.
That's done.
And only subjugated people, enslaved people, not Roman citizens. No Roman citizen could be crucified. So when they're beating Paul and they're threatening to crucify him in Jerusalem, what does he say?
He dropped his.
Can you do this to a Roman citizen? And what did they immediately do? Oh,
Disappeared.
Stop.
you're a Roman citizen? How much money did you have to pay for that? I was born a Roman citizen. My father paid to be a Roman citizen. I was born one. Oh, get him out of here. Get him out of here. Get him someplace safe. Because Paul was not a subjugated slave people. He was a citizen. So the fact that they're saying we've never been a slave was just the stupidest thing. Why would they do that?
To contradict him.
Because when a person is spiritually blind, they cannot see truth right in front of them.
Well, they were trying to make a point by using
Sure.
it also.
Of course. But the fact is that spiritual blindness makes us blind. And we cannot see truth. That's why if you go over to 2 Corinthians.
Interesting is he never even brings up the fact like, oh, so what was Egypt? What was it?
I might be getting lost in semantics because when we had the slaves of America, they could not own their own house. They didn't get a paycheck at the end of their labor, where we know that the Jews under Roman occupation own their own houses.
Yes.
And get paid for their labor.
American plantation slavery was different than many types of slavery
Okay,
in the history of the world.
We're slaves today. You pay an income tax, you're taxed on your labor. That's slavery. You're a very high-end slave compared to others, but yeah, slavery has different variations. Yeah, you are a slave.
What if you're a bum on the street? You're not a slave.
Yeah, you're not.
okay, so that's where I'm
Yes,
getting,
you're not a slave.
that's where I'm getting stuck because.
So I don't know.
When I
Well,
think of slaves,
I'm
I
not
think
talking about
of
bums, I'm talking about Ron or
America.
you.
Second
We have
Corinthians,
WTB
Second
stuff.
Corinthians chapter 4. Verses 3 and 4. 2 Corinthians 4, 3 and 4.
even if our gospel is veiled,
Veiled.
veiled. It is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Go on.
So what is he saying there?
A spiritual blindness.
That there is a supernatural spiritual blindness that is satanic in origin.
So it comes from Satan.
And it affects the thinking of unsaved people. So when they're making these statements, it sounds perfectly reasonable to them. Have you ever talked to a person that lived the drug lifestyle?
Yes.
And they'll talk about how, man, doing drugs, it's so like mind opening and you have such wonder, man, it's like you get such revelations and then
The guys I were talking to were on the other side.
so then you get those guys that hang around guys that are high and spaced out on that when they're sober and listen to the rantings of these burned out druggies. And what do they suddenly say?
Crazy.
This stuff is gobbledygook. I remember the first time I drove Patrick up to America's Keswick. And he had just done enough meth to put a spaceship into orbit. I didn't know that a person could talk for an hour and 25 or 30 minutes without ever taking a breath.
It doesn't take drugs to do that.
My mom.
No. I mean, he did not take he went, oh, in the parking lot. And he didn't take a breath till he pulled in. It was just. And you know that there weren't 6 words in that whole thing that made 3 licks of sense.
Nothing worth writing down.
No. Spiritually, that's what happens. The God of this age has blinded the minds, not the eyes, the minds. So if you'd have asked those Jews on that day, what are you saying? Makes perfect sense to me. You're saying you've never been slaves. Yep, that's what we're saying.
Where'd you come from just now?
Gotcha.
And if you've ever seen a person that will sit there and argue, and when you tell them, no, it's this, they'll go, yeah, it's that way. Well, then it can't be that. Yes, it can. Yeah. And I've had people argue both sides of the position that they were on with a straight face as though they're not contradicting each other themselves. And they look at you like, how are you so stupid that you can't understand that it's both A and not A, and both of them are right, and you're an idiot for not seeing that? And you go,
2 = 20.
yeah.
See that?
But again, that is a spiritual blindness. God bless.